Have you ever wondered how your daily supplements might affect your Hashimoto's or autoimmunity? Join me as we unravel the connection between supplements and autoimmune conditions and how they might make them better and how they also might make them worse.
Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor Podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started.
Hey everybody, Dr. Shook here. By the way, I'm sick. Yes, thank you to my daughter who brought home whatever it was from school, like the second week back, and then she brings home something, and she has it for 3 or 4 days, and then all of a sudden I wake up with a sore throat. Now my nose is running, and I'm literally sitting here with tissue plugging my nose. So I feel okay, though my nose won't stop running. So please excuse the nasally sound. But today we're going to dive deep into the world of supplements, and we're going to talk about their relationship to autoimmune conditions. And this is something really important and interesting. And a lot of people, you may have experienced some problems taking supplements, or they may have made you feel better. And there's a reason for that. And it's important to not make some common mistakes and to realize that supplements can either be your friend or they can be your enemy. So think of it this way. Your immune system has different parts, and you just imagine that you have two friends, okay? And one friend, their name is Th1, means T helper 1. And this is a category or a group of cells in the immune system. And your other friend, their name is Th2 or T helper cell 2. This is a group of immune cells as well. And depending on which one of these friends you hang out with more, some supplements can either be your best friend or not so great friend. If you're confused, don't worry. I'm going to break it down for you. Okay, so let's just come back to the basics real quick. So I think that the two friends that we used as an analogy to try and understand the Th1 and Th2 system is a good analogy, but let's try a different one. I think this might be even easier to understand. The immune system, think of it as more of a seesaw, where on one side you have the Th1 system, and on the other side you have the Th2 system, and they are either in balance or one is more dominant than the other, okay? And just bear with me. I'm going to pull this together and make this relevant to you and usable. So when one side of this seesaw, this Th1 or Th2 balance, this immune response is heavier, it indicates a dominance of that particular side, which can lead to an imbalance in our immune response. This polarization is really important here. This imbalance can actually lead to autoimmune disease. It can also lead to exacerbation of autoimmune diseases. So let's clarify exactly what this Th1 and Th2 system is. These are T helper cells, and what they do is they play a very important role in our immune response. So Th just means T helper 1, and the other one is obviously T helper 2. The T helper 1 system or Th1 system is responsible for activating and deploying natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells. Okay, these are cells that go out and kill things. The Th2 system is in charge of activating B cells, another type of immune cell, and the release of antibodies. So it's often referred to as like a humorally mediated system. And the Th1 is often referred to as like a cellular mediated system. So Th1 activates these cells that go kill things. Th2 activates cells that produce antibodies. And this is a really important thing to to just have this general concept of, because again, an imbalance in the system can lead to all kinds of health issues. And if you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, this is a really important thing to make note of. And I'm going to give you some actionable steps and things to consider here in just a second. So, for example, how the system can go wrong is, for example, if you're producing too many of these natural killer and cytotoxic T cells, right? The ones we said that are Th1, then you are Th1 dominant. Okay, that part of the immune system is very active. On the other hand, if you're producing too many B cells and you're releasing all these antibodies, you're Th2 dominant. Now, this in normal, the immune system normally shifts. I mean, this is a normal thing where you'll become dominant on one side, but then it should come back to a state of balance. So the immune system uses this, the activation of these systems to help with clearing pathogens and things that the immune system is responding to, but then it should come back to a baseline of balance where there's surveillance and not an overly active system that's causing damage to the tissues or the body. So again, if you're dominant in one of these systems, it can lead to various autoimmune conditions. And I mean, it's estimated, and this is something that clinically you want to think about, but it's estimated that about 90% of Hashimoto's patients are Th1 dominant. And, so people will say, well, how do we determine this dominance? And there's a few different ways that you can just observe to see if someone is more likely to be or to have this particular, Th1 dominance, for example. So you can observe responses to different supplementation, because we're going to talk about specific supplements in a second. Or you can also run some different panels which look at cytokines, which are these chemical messengers of our immune system. And that can be helpful as well to give you some insight on what the immune system is doing. So these cytokines, again, these are chemical messengers of our immune system. And so if the Th1 system is active, you're going to likely have a greater dominance of a particular set of these chemical messengers that are produced by the cells that are activated in that Th1 system. And then, if the Th2 system is more active, then you will have an increase in these cytokines that are more associated with the Th2 system. So if you look at the cytokines on a blood panel, on a test, you have to look at them in the blood, then you can get an idea of potential dominance. I don't run those tests that much. In the past, I did much more of that. What I do is I actually look for reactions to various supplements, which is what I want to talk about next. So let's talk about supplementation and how your response to certain supplements may actually give you a pretty clear indication of whether or not you are Th1 dominant or Th2 dominant. And then I'm going to explain how you can use that to support the immune system. But let's start with, I think, a really important concept first, and that is that restoring balance to the system is usually a really key factor in people that are autoimmune, people that have Hashimoto's or any autoimmune condition. Restoring balance to the system, because a lot of people that have autoimmunity, they're getting tissue destruction that is persistent and ongoing. And this polarization of the immune response, one way or the other, is actually a driver of the immune system. It's what the immune system is doing that's driving the inflammatory response and promoting tissue destruction. So, first of all, if you can identify what's, get some ideas as to what is stimulating the immune system and driving it one way or the other, that's a really important thing to do. But there are some foundational things that we can do just to make sure that the body can carry out normal physiology. And this is kind of like, all right, without testing for a lot of things, what can we do on a very foundational level just to assist the body in normal physiological function without trying to go and do 1,000 different tests? And this is kind of like, how can we support baseline physiology to make sure that the body can do what it needs to do? And a lot of people really benefit from the approach like I'm going to share with you. So the first thing is restoring balance to this system is key. And the first step to really support the T cells, the It's to support a particular type of cells called regulatory T cells. And these regulatory T cells, what they do is they monitor the immune response and they regulate how these Th1 and Th2 cells become active. So separate from the Th1 system and the Th2 system, we're talking about something called regulatory T cells. And these are kind of like the conductors of the orchestra. And if your regulatory T cells aren't functioning optimally, then you're going to have issues with Th1 and Th2 dominance for sure. I mean, that's going to be much more likely to occur. Okay, so think about that. Establishing optimal regulatory support of the system is a great place to begin. So things like vitamin D, if you have autoimmunity and you've been trying to figure out how to help yourself and you've been looking around at things, reading things online, watching videos, you undoubtedly have heard about vitamin D and its importance. And it is probably, if someone said, hey, what is one thing and only one thing that you would say in general is probably the most critical thing for autoimmunity, I would probably say optimizing vitamin D, or I would say sleep, but probably vitamin D. And that's because it has such a profound effect on these regulatory T cells and their ability to orchestrate and balance the Th1 and Th2 systems that we know, when they're imbalanced, tend to be a signature of autoimmunity or an active immune response. And that could lead to more tissue destruction and problems. So vitamin D is critical. Getting your vitamin D levels optimal is critical. And I would say, as with everything that I share, talk to your doctor first. This is not medical advice. I don't know your unique situation, but before you make any changes, talk to them. But I would say in my clinical practice, what I see is as optimal is really a vitamin D at a minimum of 50 blood serum levels. And then I see some people that do better closer to 70, even 90, because the lab range is 30 to 100. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're getting vitamin K with that, so that it helps to, vitamin K helps with the direction of basically calcium in the blood, so that it goes to the right places, it goes into the bones, and it doesn't go into the soft tissues. So you always want to take a vitamin D supplement with making sure you're getting adequate vitamin K. And I like to take a vitamin D and K combination so that you get a little bit of both of those really important vitamins. So vitamin D is really important for supporting regulatory immune cells, this regulatory T cell that balances the Th1 and Th2 systems. The second thing is glutathione. Now, glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body. It's incredibly important for immune system regulatory function, for helping to quench inflammatory responses, and it is the most important antioxidant in our body. And I want to be real clear about something here. More antioxidant is not better. It is like, do you have antioxidants? Is your antioxidant system working? And most people that are autoimmune, at least initially, they need antioxidant support. And there's things that you want to do from a dietary perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, to bolster and support your endogenous, your internal antioxidant production. And you don't want to necessarily just pull from external antioxidants all the time. But it is, with autoimmunity, I've seen that utilizing glutathione as a supplement can be incredibly beneficial. And in particular, utilizing liposomal forms that are highly absorbable, or utilizing the S-acetylglutathione, which is another form that has higher absorbability. And then third, using something like N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione, that you could supplement with. And it's a sulfur-based compound as glutathione that can help to increase those levels. So those are two really important things: vitamin D, glutathione levels. And then, you want to try to do as much as you can. You want to try to get this stuff from your food. But these are things that I'm sharing with you now that typically, my experience has been that if you utilize these things in a supplementation form, you can increase the levels more rapidly and you can see more significant benefit quickly. So vitamin D, glutathione, and then essential fatty acids are absolutely critical. And essential fatty acids in particular, from from either fish. I like cod liver oil is fantastic. I like there are tons of great brands, and they're in different forms. But like as far as a liquid goes, I like the Carlson's brand cod liver oil. I like it. It has some vitamin D in there. It's fantastic. I like to take the liquid. I don't have any problems with it with taking supplements, and some people do. So if you have a problem with it, then you might want to go with something like a capsule, like a gel capsule. And you would want to look for, in that case, in my opinion, like a triglyceride-based form, which is a little bit more expensive. And then if you are looking for, like you don't want to consume like an animal-based source, then I would look at the algal-based oils from algae. Okay, so you can look those up, like algae-based essential fatty acids, and I think that Carlson's makes one of those, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked just recently with that, but that can also be a really good source, because when you start getting into like, well, I'm going to get, essential fatty acids, what we're really talking about are omega-3s primarily. Omega-3 fatty acids and getting sufficient amounts of EPA and DHA. And a lot of people will say, well, I can just take like a plant-based source like flaxseed, for example. And the problem with that is that there's a conversion issue that some people have with converting that into a form that we need. And if you take an animal-based source, it's already in the form that our body readily utilizes. So you can the nice thing about the algae-based is that it's already in the form that our body utilizes. You don't have to convert it like you do with the plant-based omega-3s. So, and it's not that the plant-based omega-3s aren't good. They're very good, but you have to convert them. So you want to get, especially in this situation that we're talking about, regulating the immune response. I would recommend don't make it harder on your body. You want to avoid as many potential pitfalls here as you can. So, step one. Improve regulatory T cell function, vitamin D, glutathione, essential fatty acids, and that's a really great place to start just from a supplemental perspective. I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes, and I'll talk about some of the lifestyle things. Now, in addition to understanding whether you're Th1 or Th2 dominant, right? We're back on the seesaw. We're talking about the Th1 cell group, the Th2 cell group, and if one is more dominant than the other, and then we're talking about like abnormally dominant. This is not like a short-term transient normal response by the immune system. This is something that's persisting, which we commonly see with autoimmunity. If you're more dominant, then this can create some significant problems for you. And if you can determine if you're dominant one way or the other, this can be helpful, because then you can utilize like really targeted natural compounds to try and balance that immune response. So let's talk about the different herbs and things that we see that drive these pathways, and depending on how you respond, they can give you clues as to your particular dominance. That is, of course, if you are dominant in Th1 or the Th2 system. So, for instance, let's talk about like something like we've all heard about using like echinacea, for example, right? If you have a cold like I do today, which you probably tell, then you'll see all these teas in the supermarket that are out there that have various compounds in them that are like, cold care tea or whatever it is. And those almost always, if you'll look at the ingredients, they almost always have things that support herbs that have been shown to support the Th1 system. And these are those cytotoxic T cells, those natural killer cells that go out and kill things. They tend to be more involved in like viral, supporting the neutralization of viral activity. But for example, echinacea stimulates the Th1 pathway, right? So where on the other hand, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, caffeine stimulates the Th2 pathway. So, in addition to, as a side note, in addition to caffeine stimulating the stress response and stimulating your adrenal glands to make more cortisol and adrenaline, which is where we get all of our benefit from like the pick-me-up that it gives you, it also has an effect on your immune system. And that's something that is very frequently missed, because in the media today you hear about all these benefits of coffee, and like, for example, just coffee, let's just use coffee, but we're talking about caffeine. But, for example, coffee's really touted lately as like people live longer. There's all kinds of these great benefits. And you know what? I'm glad to see that. I love coffee. But on the other hand, you still have to be aware that if you're autoimmune, and we have an epidemic of autoimmunity today, an epidemic, that if you feel worse from coffee, it may not just be the caffeine. It may be actually that you're stimulating this Th2 immune system, and then it's making you feel worse. So that could be the case too. Now, let me use coffee as an example of something that might make you feel better. Let's just say that you are someone that has an overly dominant Th1 system, right? So it's really you have, as we suspect that and as is believed to occur with people that have Hashimoto's, there's a higher prevalence of people with Hashimoto's that are believed to be Th1 dominant. So consuming more Th1 things that promote Th1, the Th1 system, could make them feel worse. So in a situation like this, maybe consuming caffeine would actually dampen the Th1 system, activate the Th2, and bring the seesaw back into more balance. So they might actually feel better. Okay, so it's not that any of these things are bad. It is like what is happening to you, what is uniquely occurring with your immune system, and then how can we avoid making it worse by taking things that drive the dominance of the immune system, and how can we balance that immune response? And keep in mind that this is really for the layperson to understand this system, because clinicians and other people or researchers and people that are that are really knowledgeable on this, they'll critique this and be like, "Oh, this is way too oversimplified." I don't care. I get it's oversimplified. It is simplified, and the reason I'm saying this, this disclaimer here is because sometimes, if your immune system is polarized, like you're Th1 dominant, maybe you need to support that Th1 dominance more to neutralize a virus that's active or something, right? So it's not always as simple as, hey, we just want to bring it back into regulation. No, we want it to work normally. That's what we want. We want the immune system to work normally. So what I'm trying to give you here is an overview of how the Th1 and Th2 systems work, how we have to have proper regulatory balance so that the immune system can just work as it should. And then I want to give you some clues as to things that might, if you feel worse taking them, you might want to stop taking them because it might be driving the immune system in a negative way, exacerbating the autoimmunity. And there's a case to be made for maybe you need to stimulate an immune system that's more dominant one way or the other so that you can more effectively rid the body of a pathogen, like an active antigen, we would call it. So there's some nuance to it, but in a lot of cases, people are taking supplements, which I'm getting into now, that are actually making them feel worse. And they feel like crap taking them, and they might not have put this together. The supplement's making me worse, and they might not know why. So I want to share that with you. That's because I see that a lot because today we live in a world where more supplementation is just better. People, I see routinely people come to me I've never worked with, and they're taking 30 supplements, and that's. I just don't see, that's not something that I've ever seen to be beneficial. Almost always those people are worse, and it just speaks to their desperation. I get it. They're desperate. They want help. They're trying to help themselves. But in my experience, most of those people could get rid of a ton of those supplements, spend that money on good food, focus on diet and lifestyle, and use targeted strategies and do far better, because a lot of times the supplements are making them worse, which we're going to talk about now. So, we just said, for example, here's one example. Echinacea stimulates Th1. That if you're already Th1 dominant, that could make you feel worse, right? If you have a cold like I have, maybe promoting Th1, the Th1 system when you have the cold in the short term could help ramp up the immune response and help you more clearly and quickly clear the pathogen so that you get better faster. But you don't want to keep your foot on that gas for too long, right? And then in a day-to-day basis, right? On a day-to-day basis, I'm not sick, I'm nothing. And if you're taking all these supplements and all these herbs and things, you might actually be driving an immune system dominance, making your condition worse ultimately. So you really want to pay attention to how you feel. Sometimes people just need to stop supplementation altogether for a few weeks or a week or so and see how they feel, and then add them back in one at a time and see if it makes them feel better or worse. Because I can tell you right now, I have done this. I have lived a lot of the problems that I talk about, and you end up. I personally too, I have a huge cabinet full of supplements, and the majority of which I don't take anymore. But I have taken them in the past for different phases of supporting my health, and I have felt terrible from some supplements. So I can tell you I've experienced a lot of this firsthand. So let me kind of share with you what you want to think about here. So let's consider a list of supplements and ask yourself, okay, as I'm going through these, and I'll put this in the description, if you've taken these supplements and if you've noticed feeling better or worse or no different, right? So especially if you've noticed feeling better or worse, these can be clues as to supplements that you might need to either take in the short term. Now, I don't advocate taking these things forever. Ultimately, a goal would be to utilize is to get your immune system, back to a state of normal function and regulation where you're not dependent on a bunch of outside supplementation. So I just want to put that in there as well. I'm not advocating supplementation. I think it can be really helpful, but there's a lot of other things to focus on. So have you felt better or worse taking any of these supplements? Okay. So let's talk about various supplements that stimulate the T helper 1 system, right? This is the side of that system that produces these natural killer cells, these cytotoxic T cells. You see it active a lot of times with, I see it more active with like viruses, but you still, a lot of different things can stimulate these branches of the immune system. So Th1 Stimulatory Compounds. So number 1, we just talked about it, echinacea, okay? Number 2, beta glucans from mushrooms. So mushrooms contain beta glucans. A lot of times when you buy mushroom supplements, one of the benefits that are touted, it's because of these beta glucans that are contained inside the mushrooms, because it can stimulate the Th1 system, right? Which can be something that might help you with viruses. Astragalus is another compound that's very commonly found. Astragalus, echinacea, beta glucan, that's from mushrooms. Maitake mushroom, glycyrrhiza, which is from licorice, and then also Melissa officinalis. This is lemon balm. These are commonly found together in supplements that are specifically designed and typically marketed to help with like colds and whatnot and viral issues. And that's why? Because they drive this particular side of the immune system, and that if you drive that particular side of the immune system, it can help with clearing or fighting or ramping up the immune system, the side of the immune system that can help to fight off particular like viruses, for example, right? So, have you taken any of these things and felt worse? If you have, you might be dealing with having Th1 dominance, and when you take those things, it's driving it, and it's actually making your immune system worse. It could flare up the immune system. I've seen that happen, and so that can be a real common thing. So, again, I'll put this list in the description. So, now let's talk about some compounds that stimulate the Th2 system. Remember, this is the system where it stimulates B cells to produce antibodies, and these antibodies, this is called the humoral response. These antibodies circulate through the bloodstream, and they tag things so that these other cells can come behind and destroy them. So compounds that stimulate the Th2 system, okay? We already talked about one of them, caffeine. So do you feel better when you drink caffeine? And so that's it. And this is a tricky one because it's like, do you feel better because of the stimulatory effect, or is it really having an immune effect? So that's a tricky one, but caffeine. The second thing is green tea extract. So green tea has compounds that can stimulate the Th2 system. Grapeseed extract. That's another one. Pine bark extract. And these are all very commonly found in supplements, or you can purchase them by themselves as a supplement. White willow bark, lycopene you've heard about before in like probably the most commonly touted source are tomatoes. Resveratrol, which resveratrol has been everywhere over the past several years. It's commonly referred to as being in grapes and a lot of other things, a lot of sources, but resveratrol, and then pignigenol. And pignigenol is a really incredible antioxidant. But these are all things that are known to be stimulatory to the Th2 system. Okay, so do you feel better or worse if you've taken any of these things? And probably, or are these in any of your supplements? You should look at your supplements that you're taking and say, are any of these things in here? And if they are, if you're not feeling the way that you would like to feel, or if you're contemplating like, what am I doing and am I really on the right track? You might want to consider stopping some of those things for, again, like a week or two and see how you feel. And of course, if you crash, then something that you took off is probably helping. And it would be helpful if you could identify, what's helping and what's hurting. And it's real easy to kind of get into, over time, just adding a bunch of things to your supplementation list, which that type of supplement creep is not recommended. I mean, you want to be specific, and I really encourage people to look at what you're taking and think about it and see if that's the right strategy for you, and if you shouldn't be, getting rid of some of those supplements and focusing more on your diet and your lifestyle and using the supplements more strategically, more specifically, and so that you're not, wasting time, wasting money, and potentially doing harm. Okay, so let's talk about one other thing here. Let's talk about compounds that will balance or modulate both Th1 and Th2. And these can be real helpful, actually. So in combination with what I mentioned earlier with vitamin D, glutathione, and essential fatty acids, these are things that can be helpful at modulation or balancing of these systems. So number one are probiotics. And you think about this, probiotics are what? They're bacteria. So how in the world would a bacteria have this influence on my immune system? And this just goes back to the importance of your GI tract. Your GI tract is such a critical has such a critical impact on your immune system function. It cannot be overemphasized. It is incredibly important. So these bacteria that in your gut have a profound impact on the health of your intestinal lining and ultimately on the immune response. Because if your intestinal lining is leaky or permeable or inflamed, you're going to let bacterial fragments, partially digested food fragments, all kinds of stuff that your liver's breaking down, that's in your bile, that's coming through the digestive tract. You're going to let that stuff go right through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, auto-intoxicating, driving an inflammatory response, and creating a ton of problems for you. So the gut has to be healthy. So probiotics, if they improve the health of the intestinal, the intestine and the intestinal lining, then you are setting yourself up for a better chance to have a more regulated immune system. So probiotics can be helpful. Vitamin A can be helpful. Vitamin A is, it's one of your fat-soluble vitamins. The fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E, and K. Okay, A, D, E, and K. So vitamin A is really important for mucosal lining integrity. The next one is vitamin E, also really important. It's one of your fat-soluble vitamins. And colostrum. And colostrum is an interesting one because colostrum, it's like it first is made by mothers when they're breastfeeding, and it has incredible properties that really helps with your immune response and with your mucosal lining health and integrity. And so sometimes with people that have GI issues, I will actually recommend a colostrum that they use for a period of time to support their gut health and their immune response. So these things, in combination maybe with vitamin D, glutathione, essential fatty acids, can be extremely powerful and helpful. Okay, so let's talk about one more category of things. Compounds that dampen something called interleukin-1. Okay, so interleukin-1 is one of those cytokines I mentioned. And interleukin-1, when it's elevated, what it does is it promotes basically inflammation, just to keep it real simple. Interleukin-1, when it's elevated, promotes inflammation. So compounds, if you take things that dampen interleukin-1, you can decrease inflammation. Now, here's a really important note. A really important thing to note here is that you don't always want to dampen inflammation, right? We don't always want to do that. So again, less inflammation is not always better. Inflammation is critical in the short term to get rid of things that need to be eliminated from the body, but then you want it to calm down. You want the immune system to calm down. So things that can dampen interleukin-1 are boswellia, pancreatic enzymes, and turmeric or curcumin. Okay, so those have really they have anti-inflammatory effects. So if you think about all these things we talked about, if you use these compounds wisely, what we can do is work towards restoring balance to our immune system and really try not to make things worse. That's really an important thing. So the key is to support normal immune system regulation with like vitamin D, glutathione, essential fatty acids. Make sure you're not vitamin and mineral deficient. Maybe consider some of the things like we talked about, like probiotics, making sure you're getting adequate vitamin A, E, and then maybe consider some colostrum. And make sure that you're not, if I didn't say this, but you're not mineral deficient. Your minerals are incredibly important cofactors for normal chemistry to occur in the body. That's why a lot of times I recommend like a multivitamin. That's because it helps to, fill in the nutrient potholes so that you can at least carry out normal physiology. Because like, for example, magnesium is involved in like 300 plus different biochemical processes. It's a cofactor, so it's required. So if you don't have enough magnesium, you don't actually carry out your physiology normally. So that's a huge one. Also focusing on things like lifestyle, like optimizing your sleep and getting adequate protein intake can be absolutely huge game changers. So, a lot of people, when they ask me like how much protein, I'm like, well, and a lot of people think that this might be more than they need, but I would say at least like 1 gram per pound of body weight is good. And people are like, wait, I weigh, 130 pounds. Yeah, that's 130 grams of protein over a 24-hour period. And of course, talk to your doctor before you make any changes like this. Do you have kidney problems? Are you going to have any issues with the protein? But for the most part, your body has to have protein to make enzymes, to repair, to rebuild, for your immune system to be healthy. You have to have protein. And so many people that I work with now are protein deficient. And that's a huge one, just getting enough protein throughout the day. And then sleeping. Sleep, I cannot, I can't stress it enough. Sleep is absolutely critical. So hopefully this has been helpful. This is a great, great place for a lot of people to consider starting. If you found this episode helpful, please share and leave a review. It really helps the podcast. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can also follow us on YouTube and Facebook at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. You can join our Facebook group, the Greater Hickory Thyroid Support Group with over 11,000 members, and you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Brad Shook. And remember, together, we can make a difference. Just remember, understanding your body is the first step to healing. So by diving into all of this information on the immune system, you're going to better understand your unique situation, how your body works, and ultimately how you might be able to help yourself. So we can become empowered and make better decisions on how to support and optimize our health by learning things like the Th1 and Th2 system. So just keep that perspective, and it's going to serve you well. Remember, as Abraham Lincoln once said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So what you're doing by empowering and educating yourself is you're going one step closer to understanding your situation so that you have more control and can help yourself. So I hope you have a great day. See you next time.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.